"This is your destiny," the young guy muttered discontentedly, climbing higher and higher up the mountain. "Our clan always follows this tradition," waving away a branch that got in the way. "Sakura is a good girl, kicking a stone, and will make an excellent wife." The branch hit the guy's forehead painfully, but he just waved her off, continuing his way up and saying the lines he had heard the last few days, sometimes mimicking the tone of his parents. "Dad and I got married like that, too," showing his tongue at the end. The brunette spat out and stopped abruptly, turned on his heels back and, taking a deep breath, shouted, "I don't care how you got married there. I'm not going to marry that stupid Sakura." My eyes continued to search among the trees for the outlines of my home, but there were only trees around, the leaves of which rustled pleasantly in the wind, and green bushes. Sasuke did not even immediately realize that he had moved quite far from the usual clearing, where as a child he liked to hide from his older brother and began climbing Mount Maboku, which was notorious in Konoha. Now in the head of the brunette there were only thoughts about the upcoming wedding ceremony, which could not be avoided, because the contract with the representatives of Senju, which included the family of Sakura Haruno, was concluded and Sasuke would have to marry the damn Sakura in 5 months. Spitting, Uchiha turned around and went ahead to escape away from the family, which still had idiotic traditions of the past. Who even came up with the idea of getting married under a contract? The brunette shouted, turning back for a couple of moments, as if someone from the family had been following him all this time, but he only heard the cry of some bird, which sounded more like laughter. The further he went, the gloomier it became around. It seems that there should be more sun on the top, but the trees here were taller, and the branches intertwined with each other, preventing the rays from breaking through their leaves. The air became colder and there was an unusual dampness, as if it had only recently rained. The sounds also changed. There were more rustles and the singing of birds disappeared, removing from the path another branch of a huge shrub that grew in his path. Uchiha scared off a huge raven, which soared to the treetops and not finding a way out of the maze of branches, landed on a thick branch directly above Sasuke, from which he looked down at him. Only now did Uchiha finally realize that he had long since left the territory of Konoha, wandering in the forests of the mountain, which the locals avoided, saying that demons live here. Sasuke didn't believe in all this nonsense, because he was already 17 and stupid fairy tales about yokai and ghosts seemed too childish. Looking around, the brunette noted with regret that he did not know where he was. I didn't want to admit it, but the forest near Mount Maboku was huge, and if he didn't find a way out himself now, then others would find him no sooner than in a couple of days. Exhaling heavily, he recalled the lessons of Kakashi, who once spoke about this and advised to stay in place so as not to aggravate the situation, or look for a place to sleep and stay there until they find you. But Sasuke was primarily an Uchiha, so, casting an angry glance at the raven that was sitting on a branch and looking at him, he removed the branch from the road and went on. "It's better to die here than marry Haruno," the guy snorted, making his way through the thicket. Getting out of the bushes, Sasuke went on, noticing the sunlight ahead. The closer he was to the light, the cleaner the forest road became, and in the speed he saw a staircase that exquisitely went higher up the path. Hesitantly standing on an already rather old wooden plank, Sasuke decided to go to her, noticing that the staircase started from this place, which means it led to some kind of structure, perhaps. An unbidden thought flashed through the guy's head, outlining not the best situations in which he was and in which he could get. The further he climbed, the brighter it became around, as if the place he had visited before was just a transition from an ordinary forest to this. The air became lighter, although colder, and the forest was cleaner, practically not pleasing with various thickets. At some point, Uchiha stopped and, turning back, noticed with surprise that he was already quite high so that he could see the treetops of the forest left behind. Soon the steps became higher and at some point he saw a corner of a wooden building ahead. Breathing in more oxygen, Sasuke hurried to this house, noticing that there were also railings that looked more like old vines that intricately fell on the posts that stood at the stairs. Some of these pillars were tied with colored rags of fabric, and soon there was a huge arch, like the old temples, which went up. The pillars of the arch were decorated with carved patterns depicting various animals and birds. Going upstairs, Uchiha looked around the spacious area around the old temple. It was clean, although it was overgrown a little, like the temple itself, one wall of which was already covered with moss and ivy branches that aspired to the curved roof. The temple did not seem abandoned, although there had clearly been no one here for a long time, as indicated by the grassy stone path that led to Shoji walking unsteadily to the wooden temple. Sasuke looked around, trying to catch someone who could possibly live here, but there was silence around, rarely broken by the chirping of birds and the rustling of tree leaves, which the wind played with. Climbing up the old steps, Uchiha carefully walked to the door and knocked on the door jamb, expecting to hear a resident of this building, but in response there was only silence, which scared no less. Taking all the will and confidence that everyone in the Uchiha clan possessed, the brunette pushed aside the shoji and looked inside. The temple was empty. In a gloomy empty room, there was an old table and there were a couple of zabutons forgotten by someone, which looked quite ancient, as if they had long passed 100 years. There was nothing else here. There was a corridor leading out of the room, in which nothing could be seen due to the lack of light or at least windows, so Sasuke decided not to go any further, content with a small temporary shelter until he was found. If they start looking at all, the brunette muttered to himself, remembering that he had run away from home with a scandal and his father was unlikely to start looking for him today. Hope remained on Itachi, who was most worried about his younger brother and could raise panic among relatives or at least his teachers Kakashi and Obito. Sasuke did not take off his shoes, considering that since the temple was abandoned, it was unknown what could be picked up here, although he sat down on one zabuton, noticing that it was quite clean, though old in principle, as well as the floor itself, which did not look so abandoned and old. The boards were strong and well cleaned, as were the walls. Involuntarily, I remembered an abandoned temple on the other side of the village. No one went there, but it didn't look so. Lived in, somewhere in the next room, floorboards creaked softly, turning abruptly to the corridor, where darkness reigned. Uchiha began to listen, peering into the darkness, which began to play with his mind, drawing vague silhouettes and images into his imagination. The floorboards creaked again, but closer. Standing up, Uchiha stared into the aisle, waiting for someone or something to come out of it. But the owner of the temple was in no hurry. Stunned by the oppressive silence, Sasuke took a step back when the creaking of the floorboards was repeated again and a human silhouette began to appear in the darkness. Damn Kakashi-sensei, with his survival tips, the brunette snapped to himself. Taking another step back, the owner was in no hurry to show up, just as Uchiha was in no hurry to run away, feeling some unusually strong surge of courage. Slowly straightening up, Sasuke hesitantly bowed. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I got lost and came across your temple. The words of parting words from my older brother were in my head, who said that politeness could well endear anyone to himself. I'm sorry if I disturbed you. Straightening up, Sasuke tried to examine the person standing in the doorway, but it turned out badly. Disturbed is an understatement, a male voice muttered behind the brunette's back, blowing cold breath on Uchiha's right cheek and forcing him to hold his breath tensely. Madam, he entered the temple of Kurama in shoes. The stranger was indignant. No respect. Kiba, stop mumbling to yourself and finally finish your work. The silhouette responded in the dark, freezing with its tone no worse than the breathing of this Kiba that managed to sneak up to Sasuke from behind. But mistress Kiba, a growl was heard in the voice and blue eyes flashed in the dark, which looked directly at Sasuke. Examining him, Uchiha broke into a cold sweat when he saw that the pupils of the mistress of the temple were vertical, and the eyes began to narrow, becoming similar to fox eyes. But the most terrible thing turned out to be when a middle-aged man looked out from behind him in an old worn-out robe that he had seen on the pages of books about samurai, such as they wore under armor. Sasuke involuntarily swallowed a lump in his throat when the brown eyes of the translucent man examined him, as the brunette himself examined him, stopping his black eyes on the short sword, the hilt of which was in the area of the heart. "You look pale," the ghost chuckled, setting a control point before Uchiha. Sasuke, the most unflappable high school student, picturesquely rolled his eyes and fell to the floor, losing consciousness. Waking up was not particularly pleasant, his head was cracking, his body was terribly shivering, as if he had been lying on the cold floor all night, and a strange dream was spinning in his head. In a dream, Sasuke wanted to marry. He quarreled with his father and ran away from home to the forest, where he wandered to Mount Maboku, got lost and stumbled upon a temple, met there a samurai ghost and a blonde girl with fox eyes and red fox ears. "Well, that's nonsense," an inner voice drawled, and Sasuke completely agreed with him. Reluctantly opening his eyes, Uchiha found that he was still asleep, because the blonde kitsune had not gone anywhere, hovering over him and examining him with her big blue eyes. Her blonde hair was tied in a thick braid, which was thrown over her shoulder and tied with a red ribbon with iron tips in the form of chanterelles at the ends. The bangs were long, reaching to the girl's eyes. Among the blonde hair, Sasuke noticed fox ears that were slightly pressed to the head while Kitsune was examining him. He also noticed 3 scars on each side on the blonde's cheeks, making her look even more like a mythical creature. "Are you awake?" Her pupils became a little narrower when their eyes met. "Am I dreaming?" "Yes," the man breathed out, appearing from behind the girl. "It would be better to sleep, Kiba." Kitsune bared her teeth, frowning her blonde eyebrows, and Sasuke was able to notice small fangs. Lowering his gaze, Sasuke examined the attire of his dream. The leadership was dressed in white clothes, which are worn by the caretakers of temples during the holidays, although there was a slight difference, in the form of a pattern of red flowers at the hem, as well as the sleeves were wider than usual. And the tail, which waved a white tassel affably from behind the girl's back, made the dream more and more incredible. "I'm crazy," the brunette whispered to himself, taking a sitting position. "I also thought so when I found myself with this thing in my chest." The ghost chuckled, sitting down opposite Uchiha. "And that's why he hasn't passed away yet?" the mistress of the temple asked gloomily, raising her right eyebrow. Looking at the girl, the brunette noticed that she was no older than Uchiha himself, at least that's what she looked like. Yes, and frightening, despite its bestial appearance, some parts of the body, was not. On the contrary, I wanted to touch her, because her whole image was bright and seemed warming. Sasuke even inadvertently noted that with her appearance in the room it became much brighter and more comfortable, as if she herself, like the sun, radiated light and warmth. Feeling the gaze on her, the mistress of the temple turned her gaze to the Uchiha, looking into his black eyes. A moment later she took her own aside, not hiding from the brunette's slightly pink cheeks. "The same girl as everyone else," the brunette remarked to himself, smiling cautiously, looking away in the direction of Shoji, which turned a light orange color from the setting sun. As if coming to his senses, Sasuke abruptly got up, realizing that he should have returned home before dark, otherwise it would be problematic. It was unknown what this kitsune could do to him after sunset and whether his relatives would find his bones later. "Are you going to leave?" the girl clarified, getting up from the floor. To the surprise of the guy, the mythical mistress of the temple turned out to be lower than Sasuke himself. Her ears were at the level of his forehead, despite the fact that there were ghetto on her legs, which made her a little taller. So the girl herself was about a head shorter than the guy, which did not upset him at all. Sasuke knew that he was rather tall, but the same Sakura was the same height with him, which seemed to him not too convenient, especially when she was wearing heels. Remembering the future bride, Uchiha shuddered slightly, clouding his mood, but almost immediately forgot about it when a blonde kitsune walked up to Shoji and opened them, letting sunlight and a light breeze into the room, which playfully tousled her hair. The brunette involuntarily compared her to a fairy tale princess, who probably looked exactly like that if she really existed. "I'll walk you out," she smiled cautiously and nodded to Uchiha, which made her ears twitch funny. They walked in silence. Sasuke didn't know what to say to the girl walking next to him. A lot of conversation options and consequences turned in his head, but he did not dare to voice any of the more or less acceptable questions or phrases, just as she did not dare. For many years spent alone, Kitsune had forgotten how to communicate with strangers like this Sasuke and therefore avoided people, although they themselves did not like to come to her domain, letting ridiculous rumors about demons and other evil spirits, which, according to the mistress of the temple, was not as scary as those who called themselves people. Although the blonde, somewhere deep in her soul, was glad that this guy wandered into her temple, awakening her from eternal loneliness, which had no end and was diluted only by the restless Kiba. "There are a lot of stars today," whispered Uchiha, pulling the girl out of her thoughts and forcing her to raise her head to the sky. There really were surprisingly many stars. Stopping abruptly, the girl looked somewhere to the side, carefully peering into the darkness. Sasuke also stopped, looking at his companion. Even in the dark, it looked sunny, emitting a strange light. "Let's go." Abruptly grabbing the guy by the hand, she dragged him away from the path along which they were descending from the mountain. "Where are we going?" But the girl continued to walk, tightly clutching the sleeve of the brunette with her fingers, pretending that she did not hear his question behind her back. Stopping abruptly, which is why Sasuke almost crashed into her, not having time to stop. But fortunately he managed to get around, slightly touching Kitsune with his shoulder, from which she immediately looked at him. "Where are we going?" Putting her finger to her lips, she winked, interrupting Sasuke, and nodded uncertainly to the side. Shrugging his shoulders, Uchiha pushed aside a tree branch, behind which it was possible to see the lake, which was not far away. The surface of the water shimmered with reflections in the moonlight, reflecting the starry sky, and above the surface of the water, in a light bizarre dance, to the chirping of cicadas, fireflies danced, illuminating everything with a pleasant green light. "This is Kirito Lake," whispered the fox, hesitantly taking a step towards the guy to get closer. "They say that mermaids live in this lake." "Mermaids?" Sasuke turned his gaze in surprise to his companion, who continued to look towards the lake. "I've never seen them," Kitsune whispered sadly, peering at the water surface. "But somehow one day I was able to notice a tail that was too big for a fish." The blonde nodded importantly, turning to Uchiha, resolutely looking into his eyes. "Is that why we're here?" "I rarely leave the temple grounds alone," the girl breathed, lowering her eyes. "And Kiba is too noisy to watch mermaids with him," she snorted, slightly puffing out her cheeks. "Will they appear?" Sasuke chuckled, knowing deep inside that today he would believe in anything after meeting with the mistress of the Kurama temple. Nagato said that on nights like today, mermaids look out to the surface to communicate with the spirits of the forest, Kitsune explained to an unenlightened person, raising her pretty nose importantly. At that moment, she seemed to Sasuke as a child who believed in such fairy tales as mermaids in the lake and various forest spirits. Although she probably could, because she herself was. And Sasuke suddenly realized that he did not know who his companion was. No name, no who she was, just a temple keeper. It's kind of corny. Are you also a spirit of the forest? Uchiha himself did not understand how he asked the question that was spinning in his head. "I?" She looked into his eyes, thinking for a second and, as if remembering something, whispered, "I'm the one who helped you get out of the forest." Smiling broadly, from the side of the lake, a splash was heard, and out of the corner of his eye, Sasuke noticed how a huge fish tail appeared over the lake, waving, as if greeting uninvited guests, and disappearing under the water. "Have you seen it?" The girl whispered enthusiastically, grabbing the Uchiha by the palm and pointing towards the lake. "Maybe it's not such a fairy tale." An inner voice noticed while the brunette was trying to peer into the water surface, waiting for the fabulous creature to reappear. "Do you even realize how worried you made your mother?" Fugako's voice was indignant, pulling Sasuke out of his thoughts, where he was returning to the shore of the lake holding hands with a mysterious girl. Uchiha did not remember how he ended up at the side of the road that led to the main gate of Konoha, visible from around the bend. He just saw the road in front of him and realized that his hand was no longer clutching Kitsune's palm. Turning around, the brunette realized that there was no trace of her, and at that moment for some reason he decided that she was still leading on the basis of frustration from the upcoming wedding, and slowly wandered to Konoha, where Mikoto was bustling at the gate, handing over a photo of the missing Sasuke to random passers-by. Even Mikoto Uchiha herself did not immediately realize that Sasuke himself was standing in front of her, and not a similar boy who happened to be passing by. And when Sasuke himself called her, she rushed to him, hugging him tightly and bursting into tears on the shoulder of her younger son, who stubbornly looked behind her, looking for someone in the forest. At home, Sasuke did not tell his relatives anything, repeating a fictional story that he wandered around the outskirts of the village, trying to come to terms with his fate, diligently suppressing where he really was. He also decided not to stutter about the temple once again, bypassing this topic, so that after personally finding information about Mount Maboku and the mysterious Kurama temple. If we take into account your tone, the younger Uchiha began thoughtfully, picking at the salad with a fork, then no. Fugako frowned, and Itachi, sitting next to Sasuke, tried hard to hide a smile while their mother opened her mouth in surprise. Uchiha Sasuke. The father banged his fist on the table, trying to attract the attention of his son, but he only lazily looked up at his father, waiting for a further remark, which was not followed. I remembered about the essay here, Sasuke snorted, shifting his gaze to Itachi. Sasuke remembered perfectly well that his older brother had been studying the history of their village for quite a long time, telling incredible stories of the past, about samurai and ninjas who lived in ancient times when Sasuke was still a child. He didn't even doubt for a second that Itachi just had to know about the Kurama temple. Otherwise, all his feigned reasonableness is just dust in the eyes of relatives, so that they will lag behind him with their traditions. An abstract? Itachi looked at his younger brother with interest, understanding what he was leading to. Yes, Sasuke nodded slightly, ignoring his father, who began to grind his teeth in anger. It is necessary to write about the Kurama temple, as if by the way, the younger Uchiha noticed, leaning his head on his hand and staring at his surprised brother. Kurama? Well, yes, Sasuke nodded, deciding that his brother's hearing had become very bad, and to be sure, he clarified, which is on Mount Maboku. I know where he is. Itachi snorted, looking away resentfully, which caused a smile on his younger brother's lips. Maybe then we'll go there and you'll tell me about him? Sasuke asked, feeling that his older brother was already on the hook. It only remained to push. After all, you studied the history of our village. Maybe. No, my father interjected, crossing his arms over his chest. The temple of Kurama is a cursed place, father. It's all a fairy tale. Itachi, don't argue. Interrupting Itachi, Fugako objected, looking reproachfully at his eldest son. It is forbidden to go to that place. Why? Sasuke immediately picked up the wave, remembering that the most interesting things, the father told exactly at such moments when he dissuaded his sons from stupid, in his opinion, actions. You just can't. For no reason. The younger Uchiha snorted. That's not the answer. Because of the fox demon, the previously silent Obito interjected, who was immediately shushed by his wife. Obito, come on, brother. Rolling his eyes, the man waved away the frowning Fugako. If the guys want to go there, then no one will stop them, just like us at the time. It didn't stop you. The head of the family exhaled heavily, realizing that in some century his younger brother was right, because he himself was like that. A fox demon? Sasuke immediately interjected, turning his attention to his uncle. Obito, don't you dare. But Obito ignored the attempts of his older brother, paying attention to his younger nephew, who was looking at him attentively. Obito was like that himself. My sensei, once in class, told me that there is a temple in the forest on Mount Maboku, which was built by his ancestor, and a guardian demon fox has been living in that temple for hundreds of years, who looks after the temple and protects the people of our village from all kinds of misfortunes. But don't people say that the mountain is a cursed place?" Interrupting Obito, Sasuke asked, raising an eyebrow in surprise. "This is due to the fact that many years ago our village was attacked and destroyed, killing a lot of people. Then the survivors asked for help from the powerful demon Kurama. He saved them, and in gratitude, the villagers allowed the demon to stay here." Obito began to tell the old legend thoughtfully, remembering how Minato-sensei told it to him. Kurama built himself a house on the outskirts of the village so that people would not be afraid of his presence here, and began to live there. After some time, he met an ordinary girl. They fell in love with each other, but they could not be together, because the age of demons is longer than people. And then Kurama asked the goddess of the sun, Amaterasu, to make him a man. It seemed to Obito for a second that Sasuke listened so intently that he swallowed his every word, forgetting about everyone around him who did not lag behind, and mentally thanked Minato-sensei for such an interesting legend, during a disrupted math lesson. Amaterasu agreed and turned Yukai into an ordinary person. As a result, Kurama and his beloved had a son who looked like the demon himself, but did not inherit his powers. His name was Nagato. The younger Uchiha shuddered, remembering Kitsune's words about a certain Nagato, who told her about the lake. When the guy turned 16, he went on a journey to find a vocation, but his younger sister, who was just born at that time, was like her mother, with only one difference: she was a Kitsune, like Kurama. Neither the demon nor his wife dared to show the child to the villagers who had forgotten about the demons. But the truth was revealed when one of the residents saw a little girl with fox ears and a tail. In a panic, the woman told her husband about it, who had long been setting the villagers against the demon, saying that he was hiding only for a while, lulling the vigilance of fools, and one day he would kill them, as other yokai did. After learning that the demon had a child, the same as Kurama himself, the residents burned down the house where they lived and killed Kurama along with his wife, and the old man did not let the girl be killed, that he still remembered Kurama's kindness and how he saved them from attacking enemies, protecting them from the flames of war, that I was in the country. Nagato also returned in speed. After learning what happened to his family, he took his sister and went to Mount Maboku, where he settled his family, building a temple in honor of his father. Somehow, Uchiha finally exhaled, finishing the story. And then what? Then? Obito turned his head to Sasuke, who was staring at his uncle with all his eyes, waiting for him to continue. Rubbing his chin, the brunette pondered, remembering the ending of the legend. "Everything is logical," said Fugako, who himself had heard this story from the old man Jiraiya. Nagato grew old and died, like his wife, and their son went down to the village, occasionally visiting his aunt, who had not aged for more than a year. "Did you stay a child?" Sasuke was surprised, remembering that the guardian of the temple was not a 5-year-old girl at all. She became a girl, but after that, the years did not affect her in any way. Mikoto laughed softly, noticing her son's surprise. "And why can't you go to the mountain?" "Because of the tales about Kitsune?" Sasuke grinned. "Demons are dangerous," said Fugako. "People say that it is easy to get lost in the forest on Mount Maboku and," the head of the family paused for a second, "those who are lost there are rarely found." Sasuke grinned, realizing that the old fairy tale was invented more for the kids, so that they would not go to the mountain, but he is already an adult. "Get out and get married soon." From this thought, the guy frowned, involuntarily remembering Sakura's joyful face. "Fugako, admit it's just an old legend," Obito laughed, propping his face on his palm. "We went with you and did not meet any Kitsune, but we almost reached the very top." "But there is a temple," Fugako continued to insist. "And it's quite habitable," who supports Minato-sensei without letting him collapse, Obito summed up. "And yet, I don't advise hanging around there," Fugako muttered, suddenly realizing that Obito had suddenly taken over the role of a more rational brother, reasoning more adequately. And what is the name of the demon, Kurama? Throwing a cursory glance at his younger brother, Itachi clarified, no, the brunette waved away. His daughter, Obito raised his eyes to the ceiling when he realized that there was no answer to this question. Minato-sensei didn't mention it somehow, Uchiha muttered to himself, can you ask him yourself? There was Rin, who had been silent until then, reading a cookbook that Mikoto gave her. He lives on the outskirts of the village. I see, Sasuke drawled, mentally upset. Uchiha wanted to find an easier way, but apparently it was not fate, and now she would have to look for Minato, who also lived at the other end of the village. As if he could not settle closer, the house of Minato Namikaze did not know unless he was lazy. The old man was a math teacher in his youth, and after the tragedy in the family, he quit and began to live separately, sometimes helping schoolchildren with a subject that modern children disliked so much. After the last lesson, Sasuke quickly left school, running away from the questions of friends and classmates about the upcoming wedding with Haruno Sakura, who also studied with him at the same school, fortunately in another class, giving the guy a break from his presence at least in lessons. Where the time that day dragged on surprisingly long and monotonously. Running out of the school grounds, Uchiha went to the address given to him by the history teacher and former student of Minato Namikaze, Hatake Kakashi, asking him to send greetings from him. Namikaze's house was quite large, but somehow lonely, despite the houses nearby. It seemed that the house, like the old teacher, was kept apart from everyone. Hesitantly knocking on the door, Sasuke waited for an answer. They did not open immediately, as if the owner did not want to see anyone. But when the door opened, Sasuke froze in surprise, meeting the blue eyes of Minato Namikaze and questions about the relationship of that girl from the dream and this old man somehow disappeared by themselves. Hesitantly, clearing his throat, Uchiha gathered all his will into a fist, introducing himself. Hello, my name is Uchiha Sasuke, I am Obito's nephew? Interrupting the guy, the old man asked, slightly narrowing his eyes, why yes. The brunette nodded slowly, come in. The man immediately smiled cordially, which reminded the mistress of the temple, and stepped back, letting Sasuke into the house. The teacher's house was not rich in delights, but the number of different books was amazing, forcing the Uchiha to stop at each stack that was almost everywhere and examine them carefully. Mostly there were various textbooks on mathematics and physics, but there were also a couple of books on the history of their village and country. There were also books with fiction and a couple of children's books. Among the books were handwritten books, the authors of which were members of the Minato-sensei family. Inside, the house was not as spacious as it seemed from the outside, although perhaps it was all about the huge number of books and other subjects of the teacher's difficult life. But the main thing is that the house just breathed loneliness, like the temple of Kurama. There were no souvenirs or interior decorations here. Everything was of the first necessity, condemning the inhabitant of the house to while away his century among books, not people. I haven't tidied up, the old man chattered, removing a stack of books from the coffee table in the living room. It's okay, the guy waved off, sitting down on the sofa, where there was a book by a certain Jiraiya, which immediately attracted the guy's attention. Taking it in his hands, he turned the book over and read the description of the book on the back. In this book there was a story about a certain Naruto girl who once saved the life of one guy, and he began to visit a mysterious person in gratitude, who turned out to be not an ordinary girl, but a mythical kitsune. Just like, interesting? Interrupting the brunette's thought, Minato asked, nodding at the book in the guy's hands. Uchiha nodded uncertainly, looking at the cover, where the title of the book was printed in golden letters, The Story of a Kitsune. He had heard of this author, who was famous all over the country, but he did not seem to write books for children. This is one of the little-known books of Jiraiya-sensei. The old man smiled, adjusting the collar of an old sweater that was worn over a shirt. You can take it to read, really? Minato just nodded, noticing the interest of the young Uchiha. Thanks to Minato-sama, yes, you're welcome, he laughed, waved off and went to the kitchen for the kettle, wondering on the go, what brought the young Uchiha Sasuke to me? I wanted to know about a legend of our village. You know I'm a math teacher, right? Sensei chuckled, looking out of the kitchen, where an electric kettle began to boil. Yes, Sasuke nodded to himself, clutching the book in his hands. But Obito said that you know more about this legend than any of the villagers. There was silence in response, distracting Namake's Minato from talking to an interesting interlocutor, to the teapot and cups. Taking 2 cups with him, Minato picked up the teapot and slowly headed to the living room, where a schoolboy was waiting for him. Did Obito-kun say that? The man frowned, putting a cup in front of Sasuke, where he began to pour hot water. There's sugar in there, Sensei prompted, nodding at a small sugar bowl. Thank you, the brunette nodded, looking into the mug, where the tea leaves floated, slowly sinking to the bottom. And what is the legend? Having sat down in the chair opposite Uchiha, Namikaze asked, putting the kettle on a small stand, which was more for plates, but also for a teapot was quite suitable. It's about the Kurama temple. Minato frowned even more and drank from the mug, surprised at such curiosity about a place that the locals once again did not dare to go to. What is the name of the guardian of the temple? Minato was expecting general questions about this place or some facts about ghosts, about which Konokovtsi have been talking a lot lately, knowing whom to thank for this. But so direct and concrete, why would a young guy be interested in an abandoned temple at all? And then a recent event flashed through his mind, which he witnessed. After all, Uchiha Mikoto was looking for this boy at the village gate, who was sure that he had escaped to the mountain, and the older brother of this guy came to him and asked about the area near Mount Maboku and where a person could most likely get lost there. Really, have you been to this temple? From the question asked by the teacher, Sasuke twitched slightly, making it clear to Minato that he had hit exactly the target. And who did you meet there? The old man grinned, flashing his blue eyes, which now looked even more like the eyes of that kitsune. It doesn't matter, the brunette breathed out, lowering his eyes into the mug. You know, Namikaze suddenly stretched out, looking up. My old man, when he first told this legend that Obito-kun told you, took me there, suspecting that I did not believe in the family fairy tale. The man laughed softly. When I first went there, at first glance I didn't notice anything like that there. A temple is like a temple. Nothing special, he grinned. And the second time I was forced to go there by Jiraiya. He is the youngest son of my grandfather, Sensei explained, slightly closing his eyes. That day I met a mythical creature for the first time. A beautiful, statuesque, fair-haired girl in the ancient robes of the guardians of the temples. I have only seen such robes in old books, the old man remarked, sipping tea from a mug. And it may seem crazy, but she had ears and a tail like a fox. Surprisingly, we were very similar. That day I found out that she is my ancestor, who protects the temple, which was built by my great-great-great-great-grandfather. So she's not a figment of the imagination? Neither she nor that stupid samurai Kiba. The old man laughed, remembering the ghost that liked to make fun of him, sneaking up and scaring him to hiccups while Minato was still a child. Kiba, Uchiha snorted gloomily, remembering his acquaintance with the ghost. He seems to have died at the threshold of the temple, but he did not go to the other world, Sensei explained, noticing the gloomy guy. So I met him, too. So your family is the caretakers of the temple? It turns out, he shrugged. Only here. The old man paused, slightly saddened, as if remembering something. Just now? Sasuke tilted his head slightly, looking into the man's eyes. I'm the last one. He put the mug down on the table. My wife and son died 40 years ago in an accident, and old man Jiraiya never got a family. A sad smile slipped on Namikaze Minato's lips. No one has come to her for a long time, and over time, when I am gone, the temple, as well as Naruto herself, will be forgotten. And she is waiting for the fate of all the yokai that people have begun to forget about. Which one? Sasuke knew the answer, but for some reason his heart shrank anxiously, and his head did not want to think about the worst. She will disappear. Why? I caught my breath. Damn it, it was just a chance meeting, so why is it so painful to think that this stranger can disappear? The Kurama temple was built in memory of a fallen demon who does not support him with his strength. Naruto is the guardian of the temple, who has not received recognition among mortals, so after the death of those who know and remember her, she will disappear. But now there is me, Uchiha reminded, clutching the book in his hands until his knuckles turned white. It won't save her, but it will only delay her disappearance for a couple of decades. Minato smiled sadly, remembering that he hadn't visited her for a long time. No, Sasuke abruptly got up from the sofa, frowning at Namikaze. She will not disappear, and abruptly turning on his heels, hurried to leave the house of an old man who could even just assume such a thing. He won't allow it. No one should just disappear like that. Especially her. These thoughts made my heart ache and, standing on the street, Sasuke turned to the house. Where was the last person who remembered her? Cursed angrily and walked away, still clutching a book about Kitsune in one hand, not even noticing how he learned her name. Only at home, wondering how Minato-sensei said her name, Naruto. The days passed quickly, as if only yesterday he went to Minato-sensei and took a book to read and, perhaps, learn more about the mysterious guardian of the Kurama temple, whose name was Naruto. The book turned out to be very interesting and, one might say, informative. Sasuke was not a fan of reading, but he read this book with pleasure, noting that he would not mind reading other works of this writer. Well, maybe except for the last ones, which I've heard about for a long time. Today, the parents had to leave for work in the city, leaving Sasuke in the care of his older brother. But Uchiha knew Itachi well enough to make it so that he would not notice the disappearance of his brother on Saturday. It's not for nothing that Sasuke spent his pocket money, honestly accumulated, on an old history book, which his beloved older brother had been dreaming about for a long time. Patting his hand on the bag in which this treasure was hidden, Sasuke went home, mentally pronouncing the upcoming dialogue with his brother. Sasuke did not know how to deceive, but to keep silent. Standing on the threshold of his own house, Sasuke took a deep breath and, gathering his thoughts, went inside, immediately bumping into his brother sitting behind a stack of scribbled papers with an exhausted look. It can be seen that things were going very tight in the matter of the diploma. Itachi, what are you doing? The younger Uchiha began from afar, approaching his brother from behind. I try not to be distracted by stupid questions, Itachi snorted, scribbling something on a piece of paper. And I brought you a gift, the brunette drawled, turning his back to his brother and taking a step forward. In honor of what? Itachi was interested. It was heard in the voice of the older Uchiha grinning at his ingenuity. Sasuke took the book out of his bag and raised it at head level, showing Itachi the back cover. For some reason, the younger brother had no doubt that he would immediately understand what kind of suspicious book it was, because he clearly heard Itachi gasp in surprise. Just like that, Sasuke shrugged, turning to his brother. Can't I please, in such difficult times for you, my beloved older brother, I don't know what you need. I'm going to Shikamaru's on Saturday with an overnight stay. Sasuke interrupted his brother, lying to him, lying from the part. He really agreed with Shikamaru, but not about spending the night, but that he would cover him in front of his relatives while Sasuke himself would go on a date with a certain person, about whom it is better for no one to know. Although Shikamaru did not ask about this mysterious girl, which made life easier for Uchiha and lying in front of a group of people. Go, Itachi waved off, knowing Naru perfectly well, not even for a second, not doubting his brother's intentions. Itachi himself understood perfectly well that the younger brother needed to distract himself in order to at least now forget about the upcoming wedding, which was just around the corner. Therefore, I was thinking of offering Sasuke to have more fun with friends while I had the opportunity. And, of course, he needed to be alone with his gift, which he had been dreaming about for so long and still could not take the time to buy it. Adjusting his backpack, Uchiha took a deep breath of fresh air, which was unusually warm for this time of year, and continued on his way to the temple. It was not difficult to get a map of Mount Maboku. Fortunately, there were enough maps of the area in the shops, and on one he was even able to find a temple marked with a red cross. Apparently the compiler has been to those places and, just in case, made a detailed map. The road to the Kurama temple was surprisingly not very overgrown, although a person who was walking here for the first time, as it was with Sasuke, would hardly have noticed it, considering it just a path of grannies who collected herbs in this area. Getting up all the time, Uchiha for some reason began to worry, like a fifth grader before a meeting with a girl he liked. My hands were shaking a little and options for dialogues with Naruto were skipping through my head. Damn it, he even imagined how she would come out to meet him. And fantasy playfully threw up the image of Kiba, who most likely will also be there and can interfere with his presence. Sasuke was so interested in talking to someone for the first time. For the first time, he wanted to spend time with someone, and not spend the weekend doing the usual thing, picking at spare parts, assembling a radio transmitter. Probably, he will not give up collecting this device, and maybe even show it to Naruto. Suddenly she will be interested. In the speed of the path, it seemed familiar, and in the distance there was already a staircase leading to the temple. Folding the map, Sasuke put it in the side pocket of his backpack, hurrying to the wooden stairs. Rising higher and higher, confidence gradually left, giving way to fear. Suddenly Naruto will not be a kind kitsune, but will behave like a real demon from the books that Itachi liked to read to him. Or, for example, a girl does not want anyone to come to her, breaking her loneliness. Each step that brought him closer to her seemed to become not just higher, but was unimaginably high for him, and the climb began to drag on. Past, hesitantly taking his eyes off the ground, Sasuke looked forward, meeting the gaze of Naruto, who was standing with a basket filled with various herbs in her hands and was looking attentively at the guest. Uchiha himself did not notice how his hand lifted in a welcoming gesture and the corners of his lips lifted slightly, greeting Kitsune, who waved back, smiling cautiously at the brunette. "She's been waiting," the ghost's familiar voice said somewhere behind her. "I walked for a long time," chuckled Kiba, appearing in front of Sasuke in an instant, who twitched slightly, but did not give a sign. "She didn't say her name," the guy muttered, looking away, and asked. The samurai chuckled, crossing his arms over his chest. "That you're bothering our guest," a girl's voice muttered, exhaling heavily. "Glad to see you, Uchiha-san," the girl bowed slightly to the guy, trying to hide a happy smile from the fact that he came here. "Sasuke, what?" Blue eyes looked at him in surprise, and Sasuke, embarrassed, looked away. "Just Sasuke," he muttered, rubbing his neck. "Naruto," she smiled and, catching a surprised look from her black eyes, said, "Sasuke, you can call me Naruto, and this?" The girl pulled out headphones from her backpack, and carefully began to examine them. The day was drawing to a close. Kiba referred to some important matters that needed to be resolved with other ghosts and disappeared during the day, leaving them alone. Before sunset, Sasuke, under the strict guidance of Naruto, helped her collect herbs for some very tasty tea, which the girl promised to brew for him before going to bed. When she found out that Uchiha could stay with her until the morning, Naruto tried not to show her happiness that he would stay with her today, afraid to scare away the seconds of joy. After all, Sasuke was the first guest in so many years. After the tragedy in the family of Minato-kun, he did not come, leaving the blonde for 40 long years of loneliness, as Jiraiya did not remember about her, but the girl sincerely believed that she would soon meet them and they would walk through the summer forest again, climbing the slope of the Maboka mountain from which the whole neighborhood could be seen, or play the shogi that Minato-kun loved so much. And today, faith in an early meeting with relatives became even stronger when the black top of Uchiha appeared on the steps in front of her house, who returned to her and spent so much time here, diluting her constancy. Uchiha was not like Nagato or Minato, even Jiraiya was different. Sasuke was similar to her, with the only difference being that Sasuke tried to seem like a mystery, but if you looked closely at him, you could see the open book of his soul. Uchiha did not try to please her, rather he confronted her with the fact, saying during their walk that now he would come to her. And Naruto sincerely believed him. Closer to sunset, they returned to the temple, leaving the herbs to dry on the street, and they settled down in the girl's back room, digging through Sasuke's things, who thoroughly prepared for spending the night in someone else's house, taking with him a sleeping bag, food and even a thermos of tea that his older brother brewed in the morning. Oh, Naruto already knew about almost all the members of the Uchiha clan from the stories of Sasuke, who told about each person of his numerous family a little bit, during the collection of herbs. Also sharing that his older brother loves the stories and legends of their area very much, after which Naruto promised to give Sasuke a couple of books that were once given to her by people in her family. These are headphones, the brunette explained, but catching surprise, he explained, they are in order to listen to music, and to make it clearer to Kitsune, Uchiha found an old cassette player in his backpack, which he got from Itachi and, inserting headphones into the connector, handed her one earphone. This needs to be inserted into the ear. The girl took a strange convex object on the wire from his hands and carefully put it to her fox ears. But there was nothing there and Naruto decided that Sasuke had deceived her, but he suddenly pressed a button and the sound of a violin was heard from this object. I love classical music. Uchiha shrugged his shoulders, seeing the delight in his blue eyes. Yes, and there's only one left on the cassettes. It's magic, Naru whispered, stretching her lips into a wide smile. Yes, the brunette agreed, watching with fascination as Kitsune closed her eyes listening to the melody that was playing from his left earpiece. But the silence was short-lived and soon, leading her pretty nose, Naruto caught the smell of something edible that was still in this bottomless backpack of Sasuke. Opening her eyes, she looked into it uncertainly, quickly shifting her gaze to Uchiha, who was watching the actions of a new friend with a smile. Realizing what the girl smelled, he fished out a pack of ramen from his bag, which he bought on the way from the village. Looking around the strange packaging, Kitsune looked uncertainly at Sasuke, waiting for his explanation. It's ramen, ramen? If you have hot water. He did not have time to finish, as the girl took the earphone out of her ear and hurried towards the small kitchen that was located behind the wall. Left in proud solitude, Uchiha looked around the room, noticing to himself that Naruto's room was neat, but without any special frills. It was not like in the last century. Many items looked quite new, but there were also modern delights, such as electricity, which was replaced here with a kerosene lamp, and the temple was heated by a blast furnace, on which the girl apparently cooked. This temple lived in the past, not aspiring to the modern world, like an island of history, although Sasuke would call Konoha a modern one with a big stretch. Judging by the stories of some classmates from the temple of Kurama, their houses were distinguished only by the presence of electricity. Here, Kitsune entered the room with a teapot that was very similar to his late grandmother's teapot, large, massive and cast iron. Remembering this, he imagined how heavy it must be, and picking up this teapot, I realized that I was not mistaken, trying to keep it in the air, and not drop it, punching through the wooden floor of the temple. Sasuke did not doubt for a single moment that this teapot was capable of such a thing. Filling the plastic cup where the ramen was with water, Sasuke covered it with a paper lid and carefully set the kettle aside, on a small iron stand that stood in the corner. While Naruto sat down near a previously unknown treat and, waiting, looked at him. In 5 minutes, it will be ready. Clearly, the girl nodded, looking from ramen to Sasuke's backpack, where there was still so much interesting. There will be a lot of cicadas today, the girl said distractedly, pulling a black sweater with a red fox muzzle on her chest out of the guy's backpack. Shall we see? Cocking his head to one side, the Uchiha asked a question in the air. Naruto did not answer, only nodding happily to her guest and returning to studying the contents of the backpack while the ramen was brewed in a cup. This is the Big Dipper. Kiba stopped near the arch that served as the gate for the temple of Kurama, and lifting his head up, he smiled a little when he noticed Naruto and their dark-haired guest sitting on the roof and looking at the stars. How long has he been here? Maybe 50 years, maybe 100 already. Inuzuka Kiba stopped counting the years a long time ago, enjoying the company of the mistress of the temple, whom he met after his death. He really didn't remember how he died, but he remembered waking up near his body, looking at how this kitsune tried to revive him. Naruto unsuccessfully tried to wake him up, but when she saw the ghost, she gave up trying, apologizing to him. What was her fault, he never understood, because it was his fate as a samurai. That day he decided to stay with her, protecting at least from the loneliness that surrounded this beautiful fox. But he was not mistaken when he found out that she lived alone and someone from her older brother's family rarely visited her. The last person he saw was Minato. Soon he stopped coming, too. When his son and wife died, the man closed himself in and stopped coming to the temple of his ancestor. But she was waiting. Despite how old she really was, the girl continued to surprise the old samurai, whom Kiba considered himself, with his childlike spontaneity and great trust in people, even despite their betrayals. But then, when the shoji of the temple stopped opening, announcing the arrival of Minato, Naruto closed herself in. For the first time, he realized that inside the good-natured and smiling kitsune, she was hidden, who had already seen a lot, but stubbornly continued to strive for her happiness, which was so unattainable. Grinning at the couple, Kiba noted to himself that they looked good together, complementing each other. Uchiha was calm and cool-headed, at first glance, unlike Naruto, who was ready for anything, taking off and rushing somewhere into the distance, but at the same time faithfully waited for her loved ones. Probably, today Kiba will walk through the forest until morning, to go down to Konoha and scare the couples in love or the kids who were testing their courage at the foot of the mountain. Morning met Sasuke with a knock outside the window and a heaviness in the chest area. Reluctantly opening his eyes, the brunette stared at the wooden ceiling, on which the sunbeam danced playfully, darting from the shadow of the curtains, which the morning wind played with. Sitting up, Uchiha found Naruto sleeping on his chest, who curled up next to him, trustingly put her head on his chest and quietly snored. Not daring to wake up his new friend, with whom they watched the stars until morning, listening to the chirping of cicadas, and then met the dawn, sipping from mugs of fragrant tea that Naruto had prepared, Sasuke lay back on the pillow, staring at the ceiling. It was easy with Naruto, as if he had known her for ages. Previously, Uchiha could not even imagine that it was possible to communicate with girls so simply, without enthusiastic screams and screams, but it was worth taking note that the girl herself was not quite ordinary. I wonder what my father would say if he found them here like that, married them. Scolded, he tore off my ears and Itachis, said an inner voice, causing a crooked smile on the brunette's face. Footsteps sounded outside the window. Kiba? Sasuke muttered under his breath and looked at the window, behind which a shadow slipped. As far as Uchiha remembered, the ubiquitous samurai did not cast a shadow. Naruto. A chill ran through his body when he recognized Namikaze Minato's voice. And so inopportunely a parallel was built in my head that Minato may have perceived Naruto as his daughter. And he's lying here. And she's lying on it, Naruto. The girl mumbled softly, suddenly hugging Sasuke in a dream and throwing one leg over him. Kiba? The blonde winced at the strange voice, but did not wake up, continuing to tightly squeeze the brunette in her arms, who held his breath, waiting for Namekaze to look out the window and attach him with some book from the stacks that were at his house. Minato-kun! Happily exclaimed the voice of Kiba, from which the girl woke up, opening her blue eyes and staring sleepily at the wall opposite, and then shifted her gaze to Sasuke, trying to focus on him. Slightly squinting, she looked pretty cute now that Sasuke already wanted to hug her tightly, hugging her, and never let go. Kawaii, Uchiha admired inwardly, cautiously smiling at the sleepy kitsune. Sasuke? Naru whispered sleepily, looking into the guy's eyes, and after a moment, as if scalded, jumping away from him, "Are you here?" A samurai's head appeared from the wall, who winked at the terrified Naruto and gave Sasuke a promising look, disappearing into the wall. "Minato-kun, they're here." "They, Minato-kun?" Forgetting about everything, the girl abruptly got up from the floor and ran to the window, laughing happily, which caused a pang of jealousy from the still sleepy Sasuke. "I've never been met like this," Uchiha said gloomily. "But I was waiting," an inner voice reassured him, reminding Sasuke of the ghost's phrase. Kitsune jumped out of the window, seeing a familiar face, which, even despite the wrinkles and graying hair, was still so dear. Sasuke, getting up from the futon, went to the window, meeting the eyes of the surprised Minato-sensei, who expected to meet the younger Uchiha here least of all. Running up to the old man, the girl hugged him tightly, burying her face in his shoulder and inhaling the familiar smell. Minato smelled of lemon with mint and ink on his hands. He smelled just like Nagato, whom she missed so much in this unfair world. But that wasn't the main thing right now. "You've come," the unchanged Kitsune whispered. It seems that only yesterday he was 10 years old, and he met her near Shoji, gently stroking his blonde hair, which stuck out unruly in different directions. Then it seemed to him that Naruto was no more than 18, but Jiraiya dissuaded him, just as time stopped for her. "This young man inspired me," Heinkads laughed hoarsely, nodding at Sasuke, who looked away when Naru looked at him. "Did he come before me?" Sensei clarified, scratching the back of his head, once again showing their similarity with Naruto. "Sasuke has been here since yesterday," Kitsune shared, grabbing Minato by the hand and leading him to the temple. "He and I listened to cicadas at night," she said with an important nod. "And he also brought delicious food, ramen, from the side of the window, which was already behind them." There was a nervous cough of Uchiha, as if he saw the old man laugh, slightly reducing his pace. "Ramen is the food of the gods," Minato agreed, to the girl's surprised look. "Really?" The girl admired, releasing namikes and clapping her hands. "Did Sasuke-kun make an offering for me as a goddess?" "You could say that," Minato agreed, entering the temple. "Then I need to give him something." The fox frowned, putting her finger to her lips and pausing slightly in the corridor that led to her room. "The kiss of the goddess?" Kiba interjected, immediately receiving a dark look from Minato. With age and experience in the field of school teacher, Minato Namecads learned to frighten with just a glance, which led to a strategic retreat of the ghost, who had been a hair's breadth from wandering around Konoha districts for so long, and not in the warm temple of Kurama. "Perhaps," the girl suddenly agreed and, smiling lightly, went to the kitchen to put the kettle on. "Someday I'll find a way to resurrect you and kill you again," the old man remarked gloomily, passing by Inazuki, who guiltily spread his hands and disappeared. That he came back early, too soon. The days flew by rapidly while he spent them in the temple with Naruto. Every day after school, Sasuke ran home, threw a backpack with textbooks in the hallway and, grabbing an already prepared hiking bag, hurried to her. It has already become customary to go to a small shop on the way to Mount Maboku, buying ramen and dango to appease the fox, who was faithfully waiting for him on the stairs. Over the coming weekend, he brought a radio remote to her, which he collected at home, showing how it worked by installing it on the roof and detecting the signal of Radio Konoha. And then they mimicked the presenters, inventing their own broadcasts, where Naruto acted as an expert in ramen, talking about its usefulness and simply divine taste. On the same day, they tried to cook ramen on their own from the products that Sasuke brought. As their culinary critic, in the person of Minato Namikaze, said, "It could have been worse," which the next day prompted Kitsune to get up before everyone else and cook this dish on her own, adding some secret seasoning to it, which the girl categorically refused to disclose to Sasuke and Minato, who liked everything very much. Mikoto clucked discontentedly when Sasuke was going to his friends on the next weekend, frowning with displeasure at his pretty face. Fugako was also against it, but he was sympathetically silent, remembering the words of his younger brother that Sasuke had become more alive and that he just needed to unwind before what awaited him. Somewhere deep in his soul, Fugako regretted that he had agreed to that contract, because he had promised himself a long time ago that his sons would live their own minds, choosing their own path. But how evil fate played with him, once confronted with the fact in the face of the damned Senju clan. The holiday in honor of the cherry blossom ends next weekend, dear, Mikoto remarked, watching Sasuke trying to cram an old projector into his bag, which he once repaired together with Obito and Itachi. Sasuke suddenly stopped, as if remembering something and, turning to his mother, asked, "Are you and your father coming too?" "Everyone will go," she smiled, hoping that her son would finally take his mind off his unknown friend and pay attention to his family. "Then I'm calm for you," Sasuke grinned, zipping up his backpack. "I wanted to go to this festival with a friend." "With a friend?" The woman was surprised, not expecting such a trick from the youngest child. "Yes," Sasuke nodded confidently and, bypassing his mother, left the room, not forgetting to grab his backpack. Mikoto couldn't believe that with the appearance of some friend of hers, Sasuke would distance himself so much from her. They would meet less and less at home, rarely crossing paths in the hallway in the morning and sometimes meeting late at night in the living room, where she waited for him every day. Obito once mentioned that Sasuke was often seen at Minato Namikaze's house, and Mikoto mentally reassured herself that perhaps her youngest son was preparing for exams with a teacher in mathematics and physics. But for some reason, my heart still ached when the thought of the end of July slipped through my head, which meant the imminent departure of her boy into the adult world, where he would have a family and he would not be up to his mother and father at all, as it was already now. Looking out of the window of Sasuke's room, the woman noticed how he was hurrying to the store across the street, possibly going to buy something. Her sons have become quite grown up. Today Minato-kun will not be. The girl shrugged her shoulders, taking out a huge white sheet from the closet, which Sasuke asked about. "So he will miss the movie," the brunette snorted, fumbling over a huge apparatus in the courtyard in front of the temple. "A movie?" Looking out of the window, Kitsune asked, pricking up her ears. Sasuke noticed that when a girl was interested in something, her ears became prickly, and her pupils became huge, hiding almost the entire iris. When she was happy, one ear would drop and her eyes would turn an indescribable bright blue color. Uchiha could bet that her eyes betrayed all her emotions, as did her ears, not to mention her tail. Now it was easier for the guy to deal with the house cat, who behaved almost the same way in peace and quiet. Finally came to his house, saving him from the problem of covering up the scratches that Hazu generously left him. "You'll see soon," Sasuke winked, approaching the girl and taking the sheet from her hands, which she was clutching to her chest. Every day she realized more and more that now she could not live without this guy, who visited every day, and if he could not come, he warned about it a day in advance. Although on such days, the girl still faithfully waited for him, sitting on the veranda with a cup of tea and devotedly peering into the distance, where she could flash her new friend's long black bangs. Sasuke brought her something new every time, gradually introducing her to the modern world of people. Life became more interesting, because it is much more interesting to look at all this in your own hands and see with your own eyes than to listen to the stories of others. Minato-kun also often brought her more and more new stories that he seemed to invent for her. Loneliness imperceptibly began to recede, filling the heart with warmth, which these two so generously shared. "Naruto?" The brunette waved his hand in front of her face, distracting the fox from the thoughts that were swirling in her pretty head. Turning to Sasuke, Kitsune noticed that he was standing in her room, waiting for her to pay attention to him. "Yes, are you ready?" He held out his hand to her, smiling cautiously. She nodded hesitantly, taking his hand, allowing him to pull her outside, where he had been cooking something for their evening. Taking the girl outside, he gestured to her to two zabutons, on which lay a plaid that had long been brought to Sasuke for the night in the temple. Sitting down on the zabuton, she looked in surprise at the sheet that hung on the wall, neatly fixed by the ends, right in front of her was a strange apparatus that looked like an iron box with a squirrel hole inside. Sasuke sat down next to her, and pressing something on the iron box, said Uchiha Film, with the support of Saiba Incorporated, presence, and a picture suddenly appeared on the sheet, which quickly replaced the next one and a quiet melody was heard from the box, while the painted people in the picture were in a hurry somewhere. A walking castle, Sasuke repeated after the male voice and sat down closer to Naruto, who was staring at the improvised screen with all her eyes. God, how much effort he spent to get a film of this anime from the cinema and a battery for an old projector that worked on his word of honor, and thanks to Shikamaru, who told how to revive this unit without electricity. And now, looking at the wide-open blue eyes of his companion, he was pleased, mentally asking the projector to survive this hour so that they could watch the anime. The events on the screen replaced one another, dragging the author into this unusual world so much that at one point, Uchiha felt Naruto grab his hand, pressing her whole body against his side, without noticing it, carried away by watching the movie. But it was noticed by Kiba, who grinned maliciously, winking at the blushing Sasuke, who pursed his lips and pointedly turned away to the screen. Will they be able to, Sasuke? Whispered the girl when it was almost the end of the story that unfolded on the screen. You'll find out soon enough, Uchiha grinned, immediately freezing when Kitsune's bright head rested on his shoulder. It's really interesting, the girl smiled, uncertainly moving closer to Sasuke. I'm glad. He put his arm around her shoulders, covering both with a blanket, which both had safely forgotten about before. I'm glad you liked it. When the movie ended, Sasuke noticed that Naruto was sleeping sweetly, smiling in his sleep. Carefully lifting the girl in his arms, Uchiha carried her to the temple, laying her on a futon and covering her with a blanket. Leaving her alone, Uchiha slowly assembled an improvised cinema, bringing everything into the house, and returned to her, lying down opposite her. In the moonlight, Naruto looked even more like a fairy tale vision than ever, carefully removing a lock of Sasuke's hair from her face, tucked her a blanket and moved a little closer, continuing to examine her. After so much time, she no longer seemed to be somehow different from everyone else, rather he felt different. That right, he loved this freedom, which he finally felt next to her. Sasuke didn't have to pretend or prove his existence in any way. Next to her, he was himself, a real Uchiha Sasuke, as only his older brother saw him, and Obito a couple of times, the only one who supported his desire to leave the golden cage that his parents had built around him. If you think about it, it was Obito who reminded him about the projector and did not stop him when Sasuke first wanted to go here, and Itachi asked Sasuke to enjoy freedom, and if he suddenly decides to do something against the family and the contract, he can count on his support. But it's still not the same with them. Let me be with you, Uchiha whispered uncertainly, instantly surprised by his words, which fell from his lips, ahead of his head. Stay, she whispered, as if responding to his words, making her heart skip a beat, stopping. Sasuke, and his heart began to beat in a frenzied rhythm, driving away all thoughts of his parents and the hated Sakura, who fortunately did not appear in front of him for a couple of days, bypassing. Now there was only Naruto, who smiled in her sleep as he gently took her hand. And he smiled back at her when her fingers tightened around him. Sasuke fell asleep in the morning, not daring to let go of the peacefully sleeping Kitsune, so tightly squeezing his palm, but they didn't let him sleep for a long time, bursting into his serene sleep with a cry of awakening in the face of the ubiquitous Kiba, who walked around the temple in a masterly manner, scraping all the floorboards that could creak. Sasuke gave his word that he would definitely find them and, finally, repair them so that the samurai would stop waking them up like that every time. Opening his eyes, he met the sleepy eyes of Naruto, who was looking at him attentively, but noticing that Uchiha woke up immediately looked away, blushing slightly, but did not let go of her hand, which pleased the guy, forcing him to forget about Inazuki, who was broadcasting something to them, trying to attract their attention. Good morning, Naruto, whispered the brunette, cautiously smiling at the sleepy fox. Good morning, Sasuke, the girl mumbled shyly, lowering her eyes down. are you listening to me at all? The ghost loomed over Naruto, pouting resentfully and ridiculously squinting his already narrow eyes. Did you say something? Uchiha grinned, attracting the attention of the ghost, who immediately sniffed resentfully. Actually, yes, he mumbled, straightening up. I said that today in Konoha the festival will be at night and you should be more careful. Why? Uchiha's right eyebrow slightly arched, showing the highest degree of indignation of the guy, whom the fox stopped holding by the hand, getting up from the futon and straightening his hair, habitually plaiting it into a braid. People sometimes come here to pray to Kurama. Your father? Some people believe that he lives in these forests and can help them, the blonde explained, straightening her robe, which had crumpled overnight. That's why you need to hide everything and leave for a while. Exhaling heavily, the girl snorted, expecting that Sasuke would most likely then go home, but Uchiha was able to surprise, as he did this time. When the cleaning was over, Naruto closed the temple with an old lock, which seemed to have never been removed from the doors. It looked so old. And the girl already wanted to say goodbye to Uchiha, but he waved her off, saying that he always wanted to explore the area around the temple, hinting at a joint walk. And late in the evening, when in the distance, on the path, the light from the lanterns began to be seen, which were accompanied by the voices of people, they left the territory of the temple, going deep into the woods. Naruto and Sasuke climbed higher and higher, leisurely strolling in the spring forest, which was fabulously beautiful in the light of fireflies, which simply swarmed here, creating an indescribable feeling of comfort. And soon Kitsune smiled mysteriously, grabbing Sasuke by the hand, as when she led him to the lake, and pulled him further and further until they were almost at the very top of the mountain. Stopping, Naruto said seriously, this place is my big secret, which I want to reveal only to you, and without giving Uchiha an answer, pulled him to a small clearing, which turned out to be a ledge, almost at the very top of Maboku, from where you could see Konoha drowning in lights. Sasuke always knew that Konoha was unimaginably beautiful during the Cherry Blossom Festival, but now, looking down on her, she was in the palm of her hand. A light breeze that blew behind them playfully showered them with pink sakura petals that bloomed on the ledge just above. Laughing, Naruto put her palms up, catching a few petals in her hands, and, slipping her open palms to her companion's face, blew sharply on them, so that the petals flew straight into the guy's face, getting stuck in his long bangs and some in a hedgehog on the back of his head. Naru, the brunette, was indignant, drawing the girl to him and starting to tickle her, from which she suddenly burst out laughing, trying to escape from Sasuke's grip. Her throat was dry, and the girl stopped laughing, breathing heavily, looking into the eyes of Sasuke, who could not take his eyes off her. Her breath caught in her throat as she leaned forward a little, lowering her eyes to his lips. Do you know what a demon's blessing is? She whispered without taking her eyes off his face. No, they say that if a demon blesses a person, then he will gain immortality. The blonde breathed into the lips of the brunette, suddenly licking her upper lip. And some say that such a person can never be deceived and will know happiness. She breathed, whispering every word, and hesitantly squeezed his shoulders with her palms, standing on tiptoe when his hands drew her to him by the waist. I haven't blessed people before. Looking into Uchiha's eyes, you're the first. And shortening the distance, she kissed uncertainly, silently asking his father for immortality for Uchiha. Sasuke, father, snuggling closer to the guy. Please don't take him. Fugako believed in legends, especially after he and his brother visited Mount Maboku. Obito was so blinded by fear that he did not notice a blonde girl peeking out from around the corner of the temple, which his older brother could notice. The years passed and over time everything began to be forgotten, as if there was no frightening look of a stranger. Both brothers got married and had their own families. And Fugako was happy to write off that conduct as a stupid childhood fantasy. If he hadn't seen her among the crowd at the festival, Sasuke refused to go with them, saying he wanted to attend a traditional festival with a friend. A friend who turned out to be a girl, with a leisurely gait, they walked past the counters, occasionally stopping and examining the goods. Fugako remembered perfectly well that his youngest son could not stand these stupid events, avoiding them in every possible way, but now, Fugako? Mikoto gently pulled her husband by the sleeve of his kimono. When she noticed her son and a stranger in a beautiful blue robe, they were openly walking a little ahead, as if telling everyone that they were together, holding hands uncertainly. So a friend, the man hissed, gritting his teeth. The girl was pretty. Fugako could have sworn that this stranger was hundreds of times more beautiful than Sakura, but why so? Why was there a play about an unknown friend? Why negotiate with Shikamaru Nara to lie about Sasuke's eternal spree with him at home? Why not just tell them how it is? Honey, maybe you should talk to Senju about. He will marry her, Uchiha promised through his teeth, mentally cursing an unknown girl who could bring discord into their family. You will stay at home today, Fugako interrupted his son, distracting himself from reading the newspaper, but I promised. Next time, the man shrugged, escorting his son back up the stairs. This was the third time this week that Fugako stopped any attempt by Sasuke to go out to that blonde person. He perfectly understood where his child was going after school and why, and he interfered with this in every possible way, especially returning home early. Today was a small victory again. Although Fugako wanted his son to visit the girl to see where he runs away on weekends, preferring a stranger to his future wife, who managed to complain a couple of times to her future husband's father's house about his detached attitude towards her. On the one hand, Fugako began to understand his son, the first love after all. But on the other hand, there was a duty to the clan, in which there is no place for feelings. Expectations were justified on Friday evening, when Sasuke was once again denied a trip to friends. He escaped through the window of his own room. Cautiously following my son, Fugako froze in surprise when he saw that girl again. Because of the branches it was hard to see her, but he was sure that it was her. She was faithfully waiting for him on the steps of the stairs leading to the temple and jumped up joyfully when she saw Sasuke. But he was more surprised by Sasuke himself, who apologized to the girl for a long absence and handed her a small box in her hands. You know, Sasuke's voice sounded somehow uncertain, as if he wanted to say something important, but he was suddenly interrupted. Naruto-sama. A middle-aged man in samurai robes materialized near the couple, forcing Fugako to believe in the stories of the kids that he had been complained about a ghost. Minato-kun. The blonde did not finish him, abruptly taking off from her seat and rushing to the temple, jumping over a couple of steps. Sasuke hurried after her, leaving behind a surprised father that he had never seen such a son. Minato was really bad. Sasuke used to think that he was not so old, but today he realized the opposite. Namikaze-san was slowly fading away. His blue eyes did not have the usual sparkles of some kind of fun that he brought into his life with Naruto. He saw this when his grandmother was dying. Even though Naruto didn't want to hear it, she knew the answer herself, because she had seen it more than once. And she will see it again until her eyelid finally runs out, if it runs out at all. She was most afraid of being left here alone. Sasuke watched how carefully she squeezed Minato's hand, and how uncertainly she smiled in response to his words, but her eyes radiated pain. She saw the end. The end of a loved one's life. I have to tell you, Naruto-chan, that you are the best kitsune I've ever met, the old man grinned, squeezing her fingers. Have you met a lot? No, breathed Minato. But I don't think I'm wrong, she laughed softly, pressing his hand to her chest. Not today. Not now. Let it be just a nightmare, Sasuke-kun. The brunette looked attentively at the old teacher. Take care of her. It's your privilege now. In the morning, Minato Namikaze left this world. Sasuke had been skipping school for several weeks, deciding for himself that Naruto was more important than mathematics or physics. Now in the morning he went straight to her to see her sitting alone at the doorstep. It seems that she did not even sleep, but answered all the questions that she was waiting for him. Only Minato didn't come and won't come. He would come in the morning, sit next to her, and they would sit like that for several hours until Kiba got tired of these sad idiots, and he kicked them out for a walk. Then they parted and Uchiha went home, where he listened to his father's lectures about duty and Sakura, which the brunette had been diligently ignoring for several months. "Sasuke, she is your future wife," Fugaku began again, who was already tired of repeating it himself. "And a bore," the younger Uchiha drawled lazily, picking at the salad with a fork. The family dinner became like torture. "Uchiha Sasuke, yes," the brunette turned his gaze to his father, waiting for the verdict. "It's not enough that you've been skipping classes for several weeks, you're also snapping. Your friend, don't touch my friends." Sasuke himself didn't expect that he could raise his voice to his father. "They have nothing to do with it." "And who has to do with what?" "That girl?" "Who? I saw you at the temple." Fugaku banged on the table with his fist when Sasuke stood up a little. "You'll have a wife in a month, and you're walking with someone you don't understand. Don't you dare talk about her like that. Never set foot there again. Otherwise, I'm not marrying Sakura." Abruptly getting up from the table, Sasuke threw away the snow-white napkin that was on his lap and went to the door. "Sasuke." Fugaku followed while Mikoto tried to figure out what was going on. The thought involuntarily crept into the woman's head that they shouldn't have let Itachi go to town with his friends. Perhaps he would have calmed these two now. Or should I have called Obito? What? "Come back right now." Uchiha Fugaku caught up with his younger son near the door, where the guy stopped to put on his shoes. Furiously pulling on the damn sneakers that stood alone away from all the shoes, Sasuke tried not to start yelling at his father in response, but forgot about it when his father abruptly pulled him by the shoulder and turned him around. "If you go to her, I'm going to her. And unlike you, she understands me, listens to me, and does not try to drive me into her medieval framework by marrying some idiot who wanted to ring me." The brunette threw off his father's arm, unexpectedly taking a step to meet him. "And if you lock me up, I'll run away. I'll run to her, and you'll never see me again. Even if you marry me to this Sakura of yours, I will leave her. And I don't care about your deal with Senju, Sasuke." Mikoto hesitantly peeked around the corner, looking at her son with concern. It was the first time she had seen her men like this. Sasuke silently looked at his mother and, recoiling from his father, abruptly turned around and left the house, slamming the door hard. There was no strength to stay here. The closer Fugaku was to the temple, the more he wanted to turn around and walk away. Stupid idea. But he couldn't give her his son. For a long time looking for information on this unusual girl. And what did he find? Nothing. No one knew about her, except an old grandmother, who assured him that there was a goddess in the temple who often helped her. And if you remember the ghost, he was ready to believe in anything. Standing in front of the temple, Fugaku Uchiha believed in the legends of demons for the first time. It was the same girl, only her fox-like eyes seemed to look into his very soul, and her tail twitched nervously, showing from behind her back. But at the same time, he felt how scared she was, which her ears pressed to her head betrayed. The girl bowed uncertainly, not taking her eyes off the uninvited guest. My name is Naruto, and I am the guardian of the Kurama temple." The girl introduced herself, noticing the similarity of the man with Sasuke. "Uchiha Fugaku, the father of Uchiha Sasuke." He bowed his head slightly, remembering that if you believe the legends, then she must be many years old and she could know his ancestors. "Are you Sasuke's dad?" "Yes," he nodded uncertainly, noticing how the girl suddenly brushed off her bangs and began to look around. "Would you like some tea or maybe?" She walked quickly to the temple, babbling something about cups and that the temple was slightly untidy. But Fugaku stopped her, abruptly interrupting. "I didn't come here for tea." She knew. She knew that he had not come for this, because Sasuke had talked about him so often that Naruto herself felt that she was personally acquainted with Uchiha Fugaku, who was against their friendship. Against them communicating, why then Fugako-san, I came to make a deal with you, Naruto-san, Blue eyes suddenly ran along the path of stone, as if trying to catch something. I don't make deals. I'm the guardian of the temple. And I don't have the power of demons. This is about Sasuke, and she gathered herself abruptly, not even noticing how Kiba appeared next to her, who looked worriedly at Kitsune, who became tense. He understood that Naruto had just moved away from Minato's death, and now also Uchiha. Why did this pathetic person decide to come here at all? Because the others were walking around from afar. What's wrong with him? Naruto-san, I know he's in love with you. But he is a man and his age is short. I can ask the mercy of the gods and he has to get married, Fugako explained, interrupting the blonde. Let him live a decent life, without regret, when he realizes that he is getting old and you are not. And one day he will come to you, as Minato-san came, and you will not be able to help him, and what do you suggest? Make him forget about you. Fugako could have sworn that he saw something break in the girl's eyes and they became surprisingly dark, and her lips parted in surprise. She was clearly waiting for neither of these. If he had not been bound by these agreements with Senju, he would have spat on everything and let his son live as he himself wanted, even if he preferred this Kitsune to an ordinary girl. Naru, I've agreed. Wait, Kiba stood in front of her, grabbing her shoulders with his hands. Did this stupid guardian not know what she was doing? Didn't she want to be happy? Just to give away your piece of paradise so that it will be forgotten again for many years? And Sasuke? Would he allow it? Kiba, listen. He tried to shake her, but she waved him off, passing through, holding out her hand to Uchiha. Naruto, don't you want to ask what Sasuke himself wants? What if he doesn't want to? Uchiha-san is right. A sad smile slipped on the lips of the blonde. One day, not an 18-year-old guy will come to us, but an old man. And I can't save him either. Do you really think, Kiba, that he will never regret living his life alone? And do you really think that I can also forgive myself for his wasted years? But, the ghost retreated a little when she looked into his eyes. I agree. Her fingers gently squeezed the man's outstretched palm. Sasuke will forget about me. Blue eyes dropped down to hide sadness. Only, she looked at the man, biting her lip uncertainly. Let me say goodbye. Naruto was always waiting for him on the steps of the temple, always. Today was no exception, however, this time, she went down to the very first step and noticed Sasuke from afar, waved a friendly hand. And he broke into a run. With each step, he realized more and more how much he missed her, how much he wanted to see her, touch her. Heck! He hadn't seen her for a couple of hours, but it seemed like forever. And now, standing in front of her, Sasuke Uchiha, breathing heavily, understood that he loved her, loves at first sight. From the first moment they spent together. With her first smile. From the first touch of her hand, I don't care about this Sakura and clan prejudices. He would stay with her. He must be with her and find a way to prolong their lives to be with her forever. He promises, Sasuke, her lips stretched into a smile, but for some reason not at all cheerful, as usual. Really, is something wrong? Sasuke confidently took her hand and looked into her eyes. Did you dream about Minato-san? Kitsune only shook her head negatively and stood up a step higher so that they were the same height. Sasuke, love you. The blonde stopped, her eyes wide in surprise. What? There was an incredible pain throbbing in my head and everything screamed that it was not true. It doesn't have to be like this. She assumed so many options for their separation, but could not even imagine such a situation. Her heart gave a treacherous squeeze and the thought flashed that she had heard it. I love you, Naruto. My legs trembled. I've been thinking for so long how I feel about you. After that day when we climbed the mountain, the brunette blushed a little. Do you remember? She nodded uncertainly. I remembered. She remembered how she had kissed him, how she had succumbed to a momentary impulse. But was it an impulse? I don't want to marry Sakura, the brunette waved off, remembering an undesirable person. Let's escape. He pressed her hands to his chest, leaning forward a little and looking into her sky-blue eyes. His heart was beating fast, like it was tap dancing. Just like her, she also loved him too. Sasuke. Naruto gently took her hand away from his chest and, taking a deep breath, ran her fingertips along his cheek, removing the dark strands of bangs from his face. Promise me, Kitsune approached, that you will be happy. The brunette nodded slightly, looking into her eyes with fascination, as if trying to remember them forever. She licked her dry lips and came close to him, putting her other hand on his shoulder. And you will find me. Without letting him utter a word, the girl abruptly shortened the distance between them by kissing. Neither he nor she noticed the light glow around them, which gradually began to envelop Sasuke, penetrating into his body. Uchiha's head began to spin, and he suddenly realized that he did not remember the moment when he met her for the first time, did not remember how they stood by the lake, how they looked at the night Konoha from Mount Miboku under the cherry blossoms. He was forgetting. He didn't even remember who this girl was who kissed him, and his heart gave a treacherous squeeze when he realized that she was crying. Why is he in pain? What for? Who is she? And why does everything hurt so much under the ribs? My head began to spin and everything swam before my eyes. The last thing he saw was a blonde girl in a white kimono with red poppies embroidered on the sleeves, tears streaming from her blue eyes. Who is she? Throwing Sakura's suitcase into the trunk, Sasuke coldly hugged his mother and shook his father's hand loosely. For some reason, his heart was heavy and something pulled him to stay. But I didn't have the strength. Betrayed by his own family, he wanted to run away from them, even though it meant leaving with Sakura, who had been his wife for a couple of days, hugging goodbye to the brother who was worried the most. Sasuke got into the car and drove away. Nothing else kept him here. On his wedding day, it seemed to him that everything was wrong, strange. It was as if someone had taken something away from him on the eve and thrown it away. His head was unusually empty, and his heart ached painfully when he looked at Sakura. Not her. She wasn't supposed to be standing at the altar with him. It wasn't her hand he should be squeezing while the old monk was reading the lines to them. It shouldn't be here. My heart was torn somewhere, and my head told me that I needed to find someone. Someone very important. But who? There was no answer, and Sasuke resigned himself. He never looked in the rearview mirror, where a blonde-haired girl in a white robe of the guardian of the temple was reflected, and smiled bitterly, hesitantly waving her hand to the one she had to let go. Their paths still diverged. Will you just leave me? Throwing a shirt at the man, Sakura screamed hysterically. Sasuke silently picked up the shirt from the floor and put it in the suitcase. Yes, what about me? I warned that I didn't want to get married back then, said Uchiha, finally paying attention to his already ex-wife. That's it. Well, scram. Gazing at the road, Sasuke again and again squandered this conversation in his mind. On the one hand, it was a pity for Sakura, and on the other, freedom. Finally, he could breathe freely. No scandals, no cheating. He didn't love her. She didn't love him. For 10 years they tried to get along under the same roof. For 10 damn years, he tried to forget the image of an unknown girl that he saw in a dream. But I couldn't forget the blue eyes that looked at him, so gently, affectionately. For some reason, there was a certainty that she was someone important. But why didn't he remember then? I didn't remember her name. He did not remember how they met and how he ended up in the forest a week before the wedding with Sakura. Who is she? Why did it hurt so much when he thought about her? Damn it. Slamming on the brakes, Sasuke hit the steering wheel. He hasn't been home in 10 years. He did not see his parents as much, having cut off any connection with them, allowing only Itachi to be included in his difficult 10 years of hell. A personal hell in the thoughts of a stranger who haunted his dreams. Immediately the man thought it was from stress. Escaping from reality, his brain invented the girl himself and secretly searched for her name, her image in others. But the more Sasuke began to notice how he peered into the faces of random passers-by who were somehow similar to this fantasy, and his heart sank when he realized that she was not with him. That's when he realized that the answer was at home, where it all started. Pressing down on the gas pedal, the car smoothly jerked, only to turn over the next second from the impact with the truck, which was rushing from behind. He didn't get very far. Sasuke? Cold, why does it hurt so much? Why does it hurt so much to move? Why is it so hard to even raise your head and see what happened? Having mastered himself, the brunette somehow opened his eyes and realized that his car's glass had cracked, covered with fine cobwebs, and was about to shatter into thousands of fragments. And he was also very close to him, trying to move his hand. Uchiha realized that he could not feel his right hand, and the left one hurt terribly, as if several thousand needles were stuck in it. Somehow overcoming the pain, the brunette was able to get out of the twisted metal, which used to be a chic car. Hurtful. He bought it a couple of days ago. Coughing heavily, Uchiha tried to get up, but his legs wouldn't obey, and he could only crawl forward, grabbing the tire that lay in front with his fingers. Somehow sitting down, leaning on the wheel, Sasuke raised his head to the sky. That's not how he saw coming home. Naruto would be scared. The brunette grinned and stopped. Naruto, that was her name. That was the name of that girl from the fantasy, Sasuke? Someone gently touched his shoulder, but he didn't notice it, suddenly remembering her. The one he loved so much that he was ready to run away from home. And you'll find me, her voice sounded in his head, hitting his skull painfully and ringing all over his head, weaving into the memories of 10 years ago the blonde kitsune that was an integral part of his heart. My head started to split. Why did he forget? He shouldn't. He loved her, Sasuke? He was shaken by the shoulder before he realized that someone was nearby. Turning around, he saw a bright light, in the rays of which was her worried face. She hasn't aged. Only her eyes, they were dull, lifeless, as if the lights that had been there before and that he could not forget had been taken out of them. I'm back, and only now he allowed himself to finally disconnect, noticing how the girl whispered something in concern and looked into his eyes. That he found her. Sasuke, don't run. An elderly man was indignant, stopping at the stairs of the temple. Grandpa, the boy whined, stopping and turning to his grandfather. We will go like this forever. Puffing out cheeks, the old man just grinned, mannerly rubbing the bridge of his nose. It's been a long 50 years since Sasuke died. The body of Fugako's youngest son was never found. And what to expect, even if the car barely managed to be identified after the fire. Itachi knew that his younger brother was alive. I wanted to believe. But the years went by and now he was 83, and Sasuke never came. Somewhere deep in his soul, he was grateful to his son that he named his grandson after his great-uncle, but still it wasn't his little brother. My father died 3 years after my brother's death. On the day his father died, Itachi found an old diary where Fugako wrote about his life. From there he learned about this temple. Mother died 3 years later. Having climbed to the top, the old man exhaled heavily and looked around the temple. Nothing has changed here, as if time has frozen for him. Grandpa, are there ghosts here? Whispered the child, looking at the old building with a scrutinizing glance. There is. Itachi grinned, noticing the frightened look of his grandson. And if you don't obey me well, they will take you away, right, for always? And they'll eat it, the elderly man remarked, moving on. Now don't fall behind. We still have a long way to go to your mountain. The boy pursed his lips and looked at his grandfather's back. The old man didn't like him at all. Snorting something under his nose, Sasuke ran after his grandfather, but when he reached him, for some reason he stopped and abruptly turned back. He saw Uchiha Sasuke in the photo. His father and grandfather often said that he was very similar to his great-uncle, but this was not the case. That Sasuke had long hair and pale skin. Probably the eyes. They had the same eyes. Grandpa, keep up, the old man snorted. Itachi never saw a dark-haired man and a girl in a white kimono appear from around the corner of the temple, gently squeezing the palm of a companion. Nisan has always been a coward. The man from the old photo will grin, and they will disappear, as if they had never been here. After all, the temple was abandoned. Probably, that's the end of it.